I am so very happy and honored to be preaching this morning. Thank you, Brent, for extending the invitation to be with you all and think together about God, each other, and the world. In addition to Brent, with whom I had a great conversation just the other week, I have two other concrete connections to First Baptist Church in Worcester. The first is Michael Harvey, who, as many of you may know, has served the ABC USA denomination in the state of Massachusetts as pastor to pastors, and he has certainly been a pastor to me. The second point of connection is Benny Liu, professor of biblical studies, actually one of the foremost biblical scholars in the United States. Benny Liu has been a mentor to me, and I am so glad to know he's part of your congregation. I take these points of connection as a source of encouragement this morning. The text for our collective consideration comes from Matthew chapter 13. It is a timely text. Before we dive into the parable, I want to invite you to come with me to the very beginning when God created the world. Some people think that God created the world out of nothing and that such an act of creation demonstrates God's great power. But God actually created the world out of something. That something out of which God created the world is a most fundamental, deep, and primal force. And I believe you and I know its name: love. Indeed, it is out of love that God created the world. As we continue to think further on who we might choose to be today and in the days to come, this seems vital to understand and appreciate. This world you and I are part of is a world made out of love and for love. As we then dive into the parable from Matthew chapter 13 with this thought in the background, we appreciate how the seeds mentioned in Matthew chapter 13 might be considered as seeds of love. Love seeds are often scattered over the earth, and God invites us to embrace the opportunity to nurture those seeds, the seeds that love scatters freely. Nurturing the seeds that love scatters upon the earth is without doubt a difficult task. It's challenging. The parable notes how some of love's seeds fall on rocky ground and do not grow root. Other seeds are scorched by the sun and wither away. Some others fall among thorns and are choked. In a very real way, the parable highlights the dangers that beset love. As I was meditating on what I might like to share with you, the image of thorns that choke seeds of love kept jumping for attention. And so I'm going to focus on the image of thorns that choke us by highlighting two particular thorns that are evident in our political moment this year. The first of these thorns is meanness. There is a lot of meanness in the world. You could get up in the morning with a song in your heart and set out with a nice, bright, upward-looking whistle and be minding your business, and suddenly the meanness of the world strikes you without warning. This storm you have absolutely no control over whatsoever. You could have enjoyed a superb conversation with a friend at a coffee shop and step out and be bumped by a bully. You could have woken up after a great night of rest and pleasure and be met with rudeness the first thing in the morning. Such is the character of meanness. The other thing about meanness is that one does not even have to step out of one's home to be met by it. If it doesn't happen to you, it happens to your neighbor. Take, for instance, Breonna Taylor, who was lying down in the safety of her own home, only to be shot and have her life taken away before her time. Meanness then is not simply a thorn that hurts us when we step on it, but something many persons experience as something that pursues them, seeks them out to hurt and destroy. Forces of hate continue to prevail in our own time. Such forces of hate choke love and break the fundamental bond of love between humans that is divinely ordained. If meanness is a reality and may be compared to thorns that choke love, then the Christian call is for each of us to remove such thorns from the garden of life. When the seeds that we read of in Matthew chapter 13 are seen as seeds of love, the parable presents a very interesting element. It presents love as always possible and as always freely scattered, but as also always in danger. Seen in this way, the thorns that choke love might be described not simply as once upon a time, but rather as thorns that choked love's breath in Minneapolis in 2020 and thorns that could choke love in our own town. Thorns that choke love are not simply thorns which choke love in a very far away place, but rather thorns that in fact choked love in Louisville and Atlanta, and thorns that could choke love in our own homes and in our own churches. The Christian call is not simply to remove thorns when we encounter them somewhere else, but to actively look for them everywhere, both far and near. Removing thorns and intervening in situations where meanness is present is vital, because the parable presents seeds of love as present and available at every moment to grow, thrive, and become trees which offer shade for love to further grow as God intended love to be, to abound and to abide. Meanness is the first thorn that comes from outside, from the outside. Another thorn that chokes love comes from the inside, as it were. This thorn has many names: disillusionment, cynicism, pessimism, bitterness, resignation. The weight of the world, its wounds, its hurts, its need for change can leave its toll on us. Things often weigh on our hearts, don't they? And these things can cause disillusionment. We might become cynical, bitter, distrustful. Because these are real dangers, we need to guard our hearts. The fact of the matter is simply that meanness produces weight, and this weight is often difficult to bear. The weight of the world, its wounds, its hurts, its need for change. The weight of the world is too much for any of us to bear alone. It is for this reason that we come together in community. The church is and can be a place where we come together for refreshing our spirits and bodies to keep on. Keeping on is hard. Shirley Chisholm, who in 1972 announced her candidacy for the presidency of the United States, knew that keeping on is hard. She fully felt the weight of the world, and yet she said, "The last thing I want to say, don't let the spirit die. Don't let the enthusiasm die." As we considered in the beginning, this world you and I are part of is a world made out of love and for love. Nurturing seeds of love, nevertheless, especially when we are surrounded by thorns that choke such love, is hard work. And while it is hard work, it is not impossible work. Do you remember the time you were taught as a child to say thank you and please? It takes months before it becomes a habit, doesn't it? And it takes years before we fully realize how saying and meaning thank you actually offers gratitude to others for taking the time to do something kind for us. The years add up further as we gradually begin living into that habit in such a way that we too take time in our time to do kind things for others, months and years. Kindness and love are lifelong pursuits, and they need to inform our daily habits and ordinary encounters every day. Talking about racism, sexism, or economic injustice need not be different. In our political moment in 2020, dealing with racism has become an extraordinary thing for so many people. Some of us may be talking about and dealing with racism and practicing interventions of love for a long time. For some of us, 2020 may be the start of such conversations and action. We all need to start somewhere. Irrespective of where we are in our journey, let us make talking about and intervening in situations of injustice an ordinary thing in our families, churches, and cities in 2020 and the years ahead of us. Practicing such things, intervening in situations of injustice, as ordinary and everyday things would indeed be the extraordinary thing. Let not thorns of hatred and prejudice choke the love that is alive amongst us. May we hear this parable anew in our lives, and may the seeds of love fall on the soil of our hearts, refresh our spirits to keep on and grow 100 times. Amen.